Hello and welcome, I'm Tafara Gadamu. Following two successful symposiums on nation building in Ethiopia, a document was produced for use by stakeholders in this country. Dubbed Nation Building, Change in Continuity, the document was handed over to the Minister of Peace, Muferiat Kamil, yesterday. The minister said the document will serve as a significant input as her office develops its 10-year roadmap for making peace a reality in Ethiopia. Well, how did this all happen? Dr. Oyvind, Aadland, one of the actors in the project, joins me to explain. A very warm welcome to the program.
Thank you so much.
So yesterday, you and the Ethiopian Foreign Relations Strategic Studies Institute and International IDEA handed over the document to the Minister of Peace, Muferiat. It's all about nation building in Ethiopia, the process, the challenges, and all that stuff. And that came out in conclusion of the two symposiums that you had in Bishoftu.
Well, let me just briefly put it into context. We all know that there has been ups and downs in Ethiopian politics over the last decades. And in particular, 3-4 years ago, things actually turned out to be quite difficult. And first of all, I had to say, who am I, coming from outside, interfering into a political subject? I have to say, yes, I should be very humble as a Norwegian, but I'm also half Ethiopian. This is where I'm brought up.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later on in the program. But this is a fascinating document. I've witnessed it up close. It is about multiple perspectives on how to go about nation building in Ethiopia. There are experiences from the outside world. There is also the Ethiopian.
Yeah, and that was the point. We wanted to create a dialogue on an issue that was not that much politicized at the outset. So we wanted to have a conceptual presentation of nation building, the success stories from other countries and the failures, and then bring that in as a conceptual issue of dialogue. And we brought worldwide scholars to give lectures on the nation building, including Ethiopian scholars. And that was the first symposium to expose the concept. And we thought that that was a better way of approaching some of the challenges that Ethiopia was going through at the time. So that first consortium, I think, was an academic exercise with very valid inputs from international and Ethiopian scholars. But it was very important that it was based in Ethiopia and conducted here and could add to the public debate.
And the second symposium was all about Ethiopia, primarily by Ethiopian scholars and stakeholders and actors and so on, right?
Absolutely. The first one was a conceptual one. The other one was, how do we then contextualize that concept into the Ethiopian context? And that was an exclusive Ethiopian symposium. It was all in Amharic. And one of the objectives of the symposium was to gather people from different segments of the Ethiopian community, to have people from different civic organizations, from political parties, from the government, from the state, from the Prime Minister's office, from the parliament, from women groups, and from religious leaders, as many segments as possible to come together and discuss probably a neglected area. State building is one thing, but nation building. And we thought that would be very right at this time. So I think it was a success.
Yeah, the coordinator of the working group, the chairman of the working group, Professor Kasahun, was here on the show right after you guys organized that first symposium, and we discussed in some detail about what the issues were and so on and so forth. But here, I want to hear from you as one of the partners from the whole exercise about what exactly happened then. I mean, you said that it brought aboard folks from a cross-section of society, so diverse, and at some points the discussion was quite intense.
And that was also the objective. We wanted to have people who never came together to exchange in an academic and disciplined way issues, conceptual issues that would be also touching on the ongoing tensions, ongoing challenges of Ethiopia. And I think that bringing people from all the different segments brought to the table aspects which actually continued into constructive recommendations. That is part of the package that we delivered to the ministry yesterday. And it is touching on the issues, and it's putting up an agenda to be integrated when the Ethiopian government is working on their 10-year strategic plan. And I think that if you are going to build a nation, there are issues that are fundamental, and that has to be discussed very, very intensively in order to make sure that you touch on what about Ethiopian history, what about the ethnic issue, ethnic federalism, and how do you at the end agree upon a kind of country consensus to deliver to the new generation through educational curriculum, and how do you go about the land issue? How do you make a constitution being owned by the entire people? I mean, there are quite a number of principles that are difficult and which are not concluded in our recommendations, but they are touched on. And it is actually trying to have a catalytic function into the ongoing debate of building the nation of Ethiopia.
And the recommendations that you came up with were actually open-ended ones, right?
They are open-ended, but it's documented. All the lectures, the conceptual lectures, then the contextualization on the concept into the Ethiopian present situation are all documented and is actually the background for a roadmap, and then of course we have a small policy brief. So it's very accessible, but it has a lot of documentation on which one can read, discuss, and hopefully inspire for more discussions.
The Minister of Peace, who was on the receiving end of this document the other day, we never had any Ministry of Peace when these two symposiums were organized. But for the first symposium, she joined you guys, actually delivered a keynote speech representing the Prime Minister's office, right? She was a minister there. So it's kind of a full circle for her, isn't it?
Well,
and that's what she actually said.
We started this 2.5, 3 years ago, and at that time, the context and the atmosphere was very different. And we that's why we wanted to approach this more as a conceptual academic approach. But then the wind started blowing. Ethiopia started the reform process. And then, of course, when we were talking about contextualizing, we could go more into what's up. But the very interesting thing is that we got Her Excellency, Minister Mufuriat, at that time, working at the Prime Minister's office, to come and open the symposium. And she was, that was a moral support to have her opening the symposium. And then, when we yesterday handed over the booklet and the recommendations, as you said, it was a full circle. And this is the agenda. This is part of the agenda of Ethiopian reforms. And hopefully, and this is not a paper written by intellectuals or an international initiative. This is a document that has been developed through a process of discussions with Ethiopian segments of society, and in particular scholars and politicians. Unfortunately, not enough women and youth, but we hope to get them on.
This was not something that you were looking forward to, but eventually they came up with the Ministry of Peace, a new ministry. This is now going to be a very interesting document that you are going to make good use of, as you have alluded to earlier on.
Well,
she said she would.
Yeah, and I think that the wind blew the right direction. We could not foresee that this would happen, but of course the situation was ripe for a change, for a reform. And at the midst of the reform, nation building is extremely important. And when you are talking about sustainability and the direction for Ethiopia forward, then of course the nation building concept and all the practicalities and the challenges are included in that.
And not an easy project.
Oh, I tell you, I have to admit that I have a catalytic function. I'm an outsider, even. You might come back to my background.
No, actually, that's where I'm headed. This nation building symposium came into the fore precisely because of you and the article in the magazine Discourse, precisely on this subject, nation building in Ethiopia.
Well, as you know, and as I said as an introduction, there has been a difficult time the last decades in Ethiopian modern history. And 2-3 years ago, it came to a point of crisis. And then quite a number of us wondered, is there anything we can do, to enter into a direct political dialogue will probably not make it. So that's why we went the conceptual alley. And nation building was picked up from the Discourse magazine, and it was a very interesting article challenging that issue. So we said, why not try to make a platform on which we can start deliberating, and that might get us into the present tensions situation. And then, as you said, we got different segments of the Ethiopian community together. I had a catalytic function. I have a lot of friends amongst intellectuals because I have been working at Addis Ababa University. So we came together. We created a platform. We searched for funding, and fortunately, the Norwegian Minister of Foreign Affairs were willing to support it. And
you played a very important role in that, right?
Well, at the time I was head of one of Norway's largest international development agencies, and to put it in Amharic, Hiluna Wokeseng. I couldn't.
You felt bad.
I felt bad about the situation in Ethiopia, and if there was anything we could do. And with the networks I had, we ignited the idea.
Why did you approach the Ethiopian Foreign Relations and Strategic Studies Institute, which was then under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs?
Well, you try to work through networks, and we had to have a link into the Ethiopian government. If not, this would be just something out in nowhere. So we had to link it to an Ethiopian government institution, and Discourse is published by that institute. So that was the link. And then we needed somebody to do the logistics and the organizational work. And IDEA is a kind of neutral organization, not registered in Ethiopia as such, but also with good links to the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And then me as a private person, together with Ethiopian friends and intellectuals, we made this platform.
But this was primarily handled by Ethiopians. You were not influencing the whole project, were you?
I had a catalytic function, and that is a principle.
And that would mean?
I wanted the Ethiopians to own and run and be responsible. But of course, as friends and as academicians, we discuss, and I do have some views on this as well. But that was just part of the whole process. I had a catalytic function. So
we're going to have a couple more symposiums outside of Ethiopia, in America next week, and then probably a couple of months later in Europe, right?
Yeah.
This is going to be.
Yeah, what we wanted was to bring in different views and opinions on this issue amongst Ethiopians who probably do not partake in the debate, and then gather their views and then come up with the recommendations. We do know that there might be different views in the diaspora. Even diaspora in the US and the diaspora in Europe may have different opinions. We are also going to the regions and using the regional universities as hubs, also to collect different views and come up with recommendations in addition to what we presented yesterday. So it is actually a collection of views on certain issues that has to be considered as we move forward in nation building in this country.
What are you expecting from this symposium in North America that's going to be organized next week? Anything different from what you've heard thus far?
I think that the law and rule, the judiciary aspect is going to be underlined, but it's open. We just had a consultation on should we arrange the symposium? Are there any interests? Are there any intellectuals who would like to participate in lecturing and so on? And when we had a positive go, we did plan it, but we haven't actually, we don't know where it will actually end, because it has to be open-ended. It has to be a contribution from the people.
Is it going to be as diverse as you had it here?
Well, we can also,
participation-wise?
When you look at the diaspora and when you reflect the social media, you see the polarization in the diaspora is quite challenging.
Okay, is that going to be representative enough, you think?
We try to be, we try to grasp as many as possible. But of course, to cover the entire area is difficult. But we are trying to have it very open, and we want the polarized community to come together and talk.
So why only the Washington, D.C. and Los Angeles as a venues for the symposium?
Well, it's a question of resources. So we start small, and who knows, this is also trying to add to a process within Ethiopia, beyond, and to contribute to the unity of building an Ethiopian nation.
And speaking about Ethiopia and you as a person, እዚህ አገር እዚህ ወደ አዋሬ ነው ያደጉት አይደለ?
በአንድ በኩል ካሳንቺስ አራዳ ነኝ። እዚህ ነው ያደግኩት።
እዚህ ነው ያደግኩት። ስንት ዓመት እዚህ ኖሩ?
ከፈረንጅ አቆጣጠር 63 ዓመተ ምህረት ጀምሬ እየተመላለስኩ እየኖርኩ። ወደ
ትምህርት ቤት ሄዱት እዚህ ነው አይደለ?
አዎ፣ መጀመሪያ ኖርዌጂን ስኩል እዛ አዋሬ ማይጃ፣ ከዛ በኋላ ጀነራል ሰንፎር ስኩልም ተምሬ ነበር።
ለምን ለቀቁ ከዚህ ሀገር?
አይ በልጆች ምክንያትና ሌላ ስራም እዛ ስላገኘው እና ግን እየተመላለስኩ ትንሽ እዚህ እየሰራው ወደ ኖርዌይ የሄድኩ እንደዚህ እየተመላለስኩ የተለያየ ስራ እየሰራው ግን አሁን በመጨረሻ አንድ ትልቅ ስራ ትቼ ለዚህ ለኔሽን ቢልዲንግ ፕሮሰስ መጣውና አሁን በዚህ ተሳትፋለሁ። I consider myself half Ethiopian. This is where I'm brought up. This is where I've worked part of my professional life, and I love the country. I just, there are some feelings that are very strong. So I have seen the different governments, I've seen the different eras, and it was my concern that also drove me into this nation building thing. And I have to say that is a concept that I don't think have been paid enough attention to.
So you also lived in Sidama, right? In Yirgalem and so on, where your father,
he was an educationalist, and he was a director of a teacher training institute in Yirgalem. So that's where my family lived while I went to boarding school at Kasainchis in Addis. So yes, my upbringing, so all my nostalgic memories of the past relates to Ethiopia. The smell, the food, the music, the landscape. When you get home, I can't explain how it is to be back at Bole and to just emotionally experience that this is part of yourself.
Even with the concrete buildings coming up and the exhaust from old cars, that's not the same.
No, Ethiopia has, of course, changed, and I think we have to credit whoever has been in power that there has been a tremendous development in Ethiopia, even if there are quite a lot to be done, and there are areas. If I may have a comment, I am very concerned about the present situation with regard to how do unite a very multi-ethnic society with the different histories, with all the differences. And as I have lived through the different eras, from my personal point of view, I think there is a a need for a kind of contextualized reconciliation. I mean, if one are to build on a platform of consensus, of unity in diversity, I think there are issues that in one way or another has to be touched on and reconciled in a contextual way. And I think that probably in Ethiopia there is a resource that should be tapped.
And that would be?
The more traditional, institutional, conflict resolutional institutions, institutions, the traditional ones, and a kind of partnership between the elders who are close to the people at the peasant.
But don't you think those traditional means of irk or reconciliation have outlived their usefulness?
I don't think so. Of course.
How do you adapt that to changing times?
Well,
because you've raised a very interesting point.
When I did my research in Sidama for my PhD, I realized that these institutional irk institutions or the elders' structures are very close to the people, and they have a very strong authority, sometimes closer to the people than the state administration.
But plenty of things have happened in between then and now that have terribly undermined those institutions.
Of course, times are moving and things are changing. However, we also saw it in Arbaminch recently with the Gamo, the conflict that occurred in Addis, and how the local elders played a role. So I think there has to be an interaction between the state apparatus and the elders, and also to get down to the ordinary people of this country. And this reconciliation, or whatever you may call it, is essential, I think, to have a platform on which to build. Sorry for explaining.
No, that's very
I think it is a point, and you can. There is a need for an irk. In what way, you Ethiopians know, but I can sense that there are some deeper issues to be addressed, and to get down to the local people. There is a lot of wisdom in the traditional institutions.
Well, I guess we have to end the discussion on that great note, and thank you very much for being on my show. Thank you very much indeed, Mr.
Thank you.